Hi, welcome to All Things Victorian. I'm your hostess, Victoriana Lady Lisa. I'm so glad that you joined me today. We have a wonderful program, something that's very near and dear to my heart. We're going to have a baking show today. Yes, we're doing Victorian recipes, and you'll be able to replicate these in your kitchen. We will give you the recipes at the end of the program. We're going to be making delicious lavender scones, Balmoral shortbread, which was a daily favorite of Queen Victoria, and also a delicious English marmalade tea bread. I have with me my dearest friend, Roseanne of Roseanne's Biscotti. She was gracious enough to let us use her kitchen today. Thank you so much, Roseanne.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you in my home. Welcome.
Thank you. And what a kitchen this is. And don't mind me if I'm a little dressed down today, but I'd like to see you turn around in your kitchen wearing a hoop skirt and a bustle. And now we're going to get started. Hi, I'm ready to make the English marmalade tea bread. We're going to start by combining some sour cream with the orange marmalade. This will give the cake its moistness. So this will be blended together. And don't worry, we're going to put the recipes up for you, and they will also be on my blog site, so you'll get to know all of the ingredients and you can make this yourself at home. And we're going to set that aside. And next we're going to take our cake flour and we're going to sift in our salt, our baking soda, and also cream of tartar. And I love that Roseanne has an old-fashioned sifter. This is a true antique. So you just want to sift these together and get things mixed. And we're going to alternate the dry ingredients and the sour cream marmalade mixture with the eggs and the butter and the sugar that Roseanne has creamed for me ahead of time. So I think that's probably good with the sifting. So I'm going to take the butter and sugar and egg mixture that was already creamed and add it to our bowl. And next we are going to alternate, as I said, with the sifted flour. A little bit of that. And then we're going to take our marmalade and our sour cream mixture. A little bit of that. And we're going to stir that together. As I said, this makes a really nice moist cake. And it's a wonderful recipe because it makes 2 loaves. The loaves will be put into a greased pan. And what's nice about this is you can make the 2 loaves and you can freeze one for company at another time. And it tastes just as nice when you thaw it out. So that's really a nice recipe that you can do that. We're going to sift a little more flour. And you know, it had to be very difficult in the Victorian era to bake and cook because we're so spoiled. We can just go to the grocery store and pick up our sour cream and our butter. Whereas in the Victorian days, they had to churn their butter and make their cream. And then, of course, there was the concern with refrigeration. They had to get ice for the ice box. So I'm sure that it was a real delicacy to have something sweet made because of the time that went into preparing these items. And of course, the expense too. Now, if you were wealthy, you had servants and staff to do all of this for you. But for the average Victorian woman, I believe it was a labor of love to be able to cook something nice for your family or for your guests. I'm going to finish up with the sifted ingredients. And we're going to blend this together nicely. This will make a nice moist batter. And then we will put that in the oven. After it's cooled and it comes out of the oven, then we make a wonderful marmalade sauce on the stove. And you drizzle that onto the warm cake when it comes out of the oven, and it just sinks in and it makes it so moist and delicious. And then you'll have all of these wonderful little bits of the orange peel from the marmalade on top, and it's a really nice presentation. And I'm just going to give it a really good mix so that we have a nice even batter. And it looks wonderful. I just love the marmalade. I can even smell it. It's just lovely. Okay, and now we're going to take this batter. I'm going to put it into a pan that's already been greased. And I'm just going to add half the batter, because remember, we will be making 2 loaves. Maybe a little bit more. Kind of just eye it up about halfway and just spread it out evenly in the pan. Try to scrape off your excess. Okay, that's pan number 1. We do the same thing with the second pan and the remaining batter. Oh, doesn't that look wonderful? And it bakes up so nice. It has a nice brown edge to it. And it's best if you chill it before you cut it. That way you get a nice even cut without a lot of crumbling. So I'm just going to scrape this little bit off here. And we are ready to go to the oven. Just a word about raising agents. In the mid-19th century, baking powder and bicarbonate of soda were produced commercially. This allowed enterprising cooks to branch out and make light cakes and cookies. Traditionally, the most common raising agents were eggs for sponge cakes and yeast, which produced rather solid cakes, more like fancy breads than modern cakes. Dost thou think because thou art virtuous there shall be no more cakes and ale? William Shakespeare, Twelfth Night. Our delicious English marmalade tea bread is finished. Doesn't it look beautiful? It's so moist, and I love how the marmalade spreads out on the top from the sauce that we added. It's wonderful. It's very nice for any occasion. This is the delicious marmalade topping for the tea bread. You start with some orange marmalade. And this is going to be slow cooked on the stove. I'm going to add some nice plump raisins. A little bit of orange juice. A little bit of water. And a little bit of rum. Maybe a little more. About half of a cup. And you want to blend that all together, and then you're going to cook it on the stove. It's going to get nice and bubbly and hot, and all the flavors are going to melt together. And then when your tea bread comes out of the oven while it's hot, you're going to take the sauce and you're going to pour it directly on top of the cake, and you're going to let it sink in, and it is so good. It smells great. Afternoon tea and cakes was established in England in the 1820s when the tea plantations in India began to yield cheap and plentiful tea. By the time Victoria became queen, it was an indispensable and agreeable daily ritual. Victorian cooks began to expand their cake repertoire, helped by the introduction of raising agents such as baking powder and bicarbonate of soda in the mid-19th century. For the next century, at least, the tea tables of upper and middle-class households were graced by such delicious confections as seed cake, plum cake, Savoy cookies, macaroons, meringues, gingerbread, scones, and sponges of all kinds. And in Britain, they pronounce it scone, which rhymes with lawn. In America, we say scone. So if you do go to England, please make sure you ask for a scone with your tea. One of my favorites for tea is scones. I'm going to show you how to make lavender scones, and I have pure English lavender with me here. We're going to start out with our flour. And then you're going to add the sugar. Again, the ingredients will be listed at the end of the program and also on my blog site. So we have flour and sugar. I'm just going to mix those a little bit, and then we're going to cut in some cold butter. And I know a lot of people will use a food processor to cut in the butter, but I really like to do it the old-fashioned way with my grandmother's cutter. So we chunked up our butter. It's nice and cold. And what we're going to do is take this cutter and we're going to then spread the butter pieces in with the flour. We're going to mix and smash it together. And what you want to end up with is something that looks like a coarse cornmeal in the flour. This way you have the butter spread throughout, which will make a very nice moist scone. I'm going to add my baking soda. Mix that up again until you have a nice consistency. And then you will put your dried lavender pieces in. And please be sure when you make these that you use an organic lavender or lavender that's grown from your own backyard. I like to take the little flower heads and just kind of manipulate them with my fingers back and forth. Releases a lot of the fragrance, which I'm smelling it already. It's wonderful. So you just want to kind of crush those up. I'm using about 2 tablespoons full. And these are a very distinct flavor, and they're wonderful with an Earl Grey tea, by the way. So again, just breaking them up to release their fragrance. Oh, this smells really, really good. And you want to continue to cut the butter in and mix up your lavender so that everything is uniform. And then once you get that consistency that looks like cornmeal, then what you're going to do is you're going to scrape any leftover butter bits or flour off. And you're going to take a mixture of a beaten egg with heavy cream. You're going to add this to your dry scone mixture. This also will make them very, very moist and delicious. I like to just take a fork and begin mixing the dry ingredients and the wet ingredients together. So you're going to kind of make a dough of sorts. You can use your hands too if you'd like. And as I said previously, many people will pronounce it scone, which rhymes with lawn, but in America, genuinely, we say scone. So I'm getting a nice batter here, nice mixture of the dough. And then I'm going to finish it off. You're going to take your dough, and the most important thing about making the scones, do not overwork the dough. Many times people will overwork it and you will end up with a very tough, dry scone. So what you want to do is just mix the ingredients together just so that they're mixed, they're blended. And once you see that happening, then you know you're good. And what I like to do, you can roll these out and you can cut them. What I like to do is I like to take a pinch of the dough and place it on the cookie sheet. And then I take melted butter with a little bit of sugar in it and I baste it over the top of the scone before I put them in the oven, and just kind of seals them and keeps the top from burning, and it just makes a wonderful, delicious, crunchy top to the scone. So we're going to put these on our tray and pop these in the oven. Don't forget, before you put your scones in the oven, to melt some butter. You want to baste the top. Gives them a rich buttery flavor, and it also gives them a nice light browning on top, and it keeps them moist because you don't want your scones to dry out. So you put a little bit on each one. Sometimes people will use a beaten egg or milk, but I like to use butter. I love butter. So once you have them basted with butter, then you want to take some really nice decorative sugar, and you're going to sprinkle a little bit on top. It almost looks like sea salt. It's the larger granules of sugar. That just adds a nice touch, nice flavor. So you want to put that on top of each one. And these also freeze very well too. You can refrigerate them if it's humid and a moist day, and they do very well in the freezer as well. So you can make several batches, and then you can freeze them, and then you can take them out when company drops in, and you can warm them up or defrost them in your microwave just for a few minutes. Of course, the Victorians didn't have microwaves and all the wonderful gadgets and modern conveniences that we have, so I think we kind of have the best of both worlds. Queen Victoria used to eat a little of this delicious shortbread every day. At Buckingham Palace, the pattern pricked on the shortbread was always the same, 3 rows of 3 dots in a domino pattern. What the English today call biscuits are much better described as cookies. Cookie is derived from the Dutch word for little cake. It has been used since the 18th century in Scotland and America, and is now finding its way back to England. The word biscuit comes from the French biscuit and originally referred to very dry products such as rusks or sea biscuits. Now we're going to make our Balmoral shortbread. We're going to take your butter mixture. This was already creamed ahead of time to save some time. This is sugar and butter creamed. I'm going to add that to the crock. Then we're going to take our flour and we're going to work it in the dough by the fingers full, just a little bit. And this is the type of a dough that you just have to feel if it's right. Now, of course, we will be adding the measured ingredients, but you have to add the flour slowly while you're mixing. You can't just dump it in by half a cup or cupfuls, or your dough will be really dry and it won't roll out the right way. So you just kind of put your little bit of flour in and you just want to mix it up. It's nice and creamy. As you continue to add your flour, you will see that you're forming more of a dough. And yes, this is the old-fashioned way that the Victorians made their shortbread. It was a favorite, as I said, of Queen Victoria's. She had it every day. It's very rich and very decadent, so you don't need to eat a lot of it, just 1 or 2 cookies, and that would just be fine. So again, it takes a little bit of time to get it right. Oh, I just heard the bell. I'm going to go check on the scones in the oven and see if they're ready. So hold on 1 minute. Our scones are finished. Oh, don't they look wonderful? And they smell so good. The lavender just permeates the house. I wish you could smell them. You really have to make these. They're really wonderful. And you can serve your scones with clotted cream and jam, which is traditional, or you can also use lemon curd or butter if you prefer. But they are wonderful. Now we're going to get back to our shortbread. Remember, I was putting the flour in with the butter and sugar. It was cutting in the flour and blending it by hand. And once you get everything blended, you're going to start to make a dough. You form a dough, and you're going to get something that looks like this. It's not too much flour in here. It's just the right ratio of the butter and the flour. You don't want too much flour in it because it will get very hard and dry. So you want them to be nice and light. So we're going to take a section of our dough off of the main part, and you want to get a little bit of flour, put it on your board so it doesn't stick. I'm also going to put some flour on this so I can pick them up, and of course on my rolling pin as well. And the cutter, everything gets dipped in flour. And what you want to do is you want to just take your rolling pin and you're going to work the dough, and I like to pretend that I'm working from the center out. I don't like to go like this back and forth because I find that the dough sometimes gets stuck and it rolls around my rolling pin. So I like to do it like this, and this is the way that my grandmother taught me to do it. So you want to try to roll it out evenly, and then you take your cutter, and you can use any size cutter you like, but generally the shortbread is about this size, and I like the fluted edge cutter, but any glass or cookie cutter will do. And just going to, like so, move your dough out of the way, and you're going to take your finished piece, and I have it on a lightly sprayed tray, and you just continue to take your dough in the same fashion, knead it together, and get it down on your board with a little flour. You continue to add a little bit as needed. Some more on the rolling pin. And I like to work in small sections with the dough. It's just easier to roll it. If you have too much dough and you're trying to maneuver it, sometimes it just ends up being, it breaks apart. So I like to do it in small sections. And you continue like so. And you just continue to do this until you have your trays filled. And then afterwards, what we will do before they go into the oven, you need to take your fork and you need to put some holes in. This is just tradition, and I think it probably helps a little bit with the baking. There's no set pattern unless you want to follow the traditional British rule of doing 3 rows in the shape of dominoes. But I think that's just fine. Our shortbread is finished, and now it's time for it to go into the oven. Beautiful, beautiful. You don't want to overcook your shortbread. Doesn't that look lovely? You don't want to overbake your shortbread because it'll get tough and dry, and you'll know that it's overdone when you start to see the edges getting brown. Don't let the edges get brown. Just when it starts, just at the very edge that it looks done and it's set, you know that they're finished. Wasn't this a lot of fun?
Oh my God, Lisa, we had so much fun. We'll have to do it again.
Yeah, I enjoyed this so much. The menu items that we made are going to be featured on a future episode when we do a low afternoon tea filmed at the historic Emerson Inn. Thank you so much again for joining me for All Things Victorian. Roseanne, in the spirit of Queen Victoria in her honor, let's sample the Balmoral shortbread.
Oh, I can hardly wait. Thank you.
You're welcome. Long live the Queen. Delicious, delicious. Real butter makes the difference.
You can taste the butter.
I can see why she wanted to have these every day. I think I'm going to have them every day.
I think I already have. Very good.
Very good. We did a fine job.